no practice is bad practice is the worst advice. I'm sure you've heard this before, maybe from other artists, and it could not be more wrong. I've seen it all in my years of teaching, and there are certainly things that you can do that will hurt your progress. So let's go over exactly what to avoid, because I can guarantee you're almost certainly doing one of them. So for you guys today, I have 9 things to avoid, and the first one is to just practice more. You see this useless piece of advice tossed around all the time as if doing more of something that's not working will eventually make a difference. It won't. If you're not happy with your progress, the method is what you should change, not the quantity. When you don't know what you're doing and you're just putting in the hours, at best you'll make insignificant progress that ruins your motivation, or worse, you'll develop bad habits, and bad habits take a lot of work to unlearn. So if you're stuck, try looking for alternative techniques. Like study the theory, learn about the art fundamentals, and you'll quickly understand why something isn't working. Now the next one might be a little controversial, but you should be very careful when working off reference, because it can easily work against you. And the idea is that there are different levels of references, like from easy to very hard. And it's detrimental to use hard references when you're just starting. You just won't have the fundamental understanding to be able to deconstruct what you're looking at. Instead, you'd want to use easy references, like something like this, where the character isn't foreshortened or in like a crazy pose, just something pretty static without much perspective. So save those harder references for later when this kind of stuff becomes easier. So references vary in difficulty. Make sure that you find one that matches your skill. Now, the next thing you must have heard before is to stop copying, bro. That's cheating. Now, copying does sound bad if you're trying to do something and make it pass as your own, like copying somebody else's work. But copying is at the root of learning anything, so you should most definitely copy. Copy from real life or from photo references to build a strong visual library. And if you've been working on fundamentals like construction, gesture, perspective, anatomy, color theory, that kind of stuff, meaning like if you have basic tools to understand what you're looking at better, then maybe start looking at the art of other artists to use as reference as well. This makes for a great learning exercise, just maybe not as useful unless you've worked on your foundation. Like my previous point though, pick ones that match your skill level. Yeah, it's really useful to learn from other artists and how they stylize certain things, how they put their own spin on those art fundamentals. Like how they stylize the anatomy maybe, or how they play around with the colors. You know, in a way, it's kind of like learning a recipe when cooking. It's way easier to start from a recipe, learn all the ingredients and like the portions of everything, versus trying to figure all of that by yourself. So with art as well, when it comes to learning it, there's nothing better than copying. Actually, when it comes to copying, there is one thing that you should most definitely avoid, and that would be to use a grid. Like using a grid can actually help you copy a drawing very accurately by separating, the big image into a bunch of smaller squares, and then you just kind of copy the content of each square. But this will only ever make you good at copying using a grid. It's not a skill that translates to anything else. So if you're trying to learn proportions, develop your observation skills to eventually be able to draw from imagination, using a grid will never help you. Now, it's not as bad as tracing, but it's pretty close. Now, the 5th practice problem is one that I mention often when the question of burnout comes up. Don't set your targets too high. It's normal to get bold and try to do things that are harder and harder, as your skills improve. But often the increase in difficulty is higher than the increase in skill. So when you try to draw something that's well beyond your skill level, you might be able to power through and finish it, but that wouldn't be without having to go over many metaphorical walls that get in your way. And when your path is like that, full of obstacles, when progress is hard, you just don't get that happy feeling reward that you normally get when you accomplish a goal. The dopamine doesn't hit. And sometimes there are so many walls in front of you that you'll just end up burning out first. Not good. So instead, I would always recommend you set your difficulty going into any kind of project to something that's well within something you can accomplish. Something you can almost surely crush. Don't make it too easy, obviously, or you won't improve at all. But plan drawings that won't take too long and are mostly within your comfort zone. So like if you're planning a big drawing with a bunch of characters, maybe dial it down to like 1 or 2 characters max. So aim small and expand from there. That's way more rewarding than starting too big and having to dial it down a bunch. The first option will leave you feeling good, and the other is a failure that feels bad. Art should feel good. Nothing feels better than getting good at something. And if you need help getting good at art, you should definitely check out my art school program. It's a complete art education equivalent to a Bachelor of Fine Arts but with a heavy focus on digital arts instead. My guarantee is that by the end of it, you'll be able to draw anything your mind can imagine. Whether you're starting as a complete beginner with no experience or as a more experienced artist. And your timing could not be better because the Halloween sale is live, so check the link in the description below for the biggest discount until the end of the year and find out why nearly 30,000 students have joined so far. There's still a couple of days left, so don't miss out. Now back to the video. Now, the sixth practice fail is to get emotionally attached to your drawing as you're working on them. I was definitely guilty of that when I was younger. You spend time on a piece, you struggle, and then eventually it starts to feel almost like your baby. And that makes it a lot harder to erase or redo certain parts, even if that might be best for the drawing. I learned this the hard way when I started to work in the game industry and had to answer to an art director, art leads. Suddenly, my job was to rework concepts, try alternatives, or completely scrap ideas and start from scratch. I had to just let go of my feelings during the process and develop the mentality that everything is temporary until the piece is done and, signed off on. Maybe it was the ego at first, but I always felt like I could nail it the first time around. Except I came to find out that most of the time, if not all the time, the revisions, the redos, the new versions always look much better. And I guarantee it gets easier the more you do it, and the more you do it also, the better your art gets. So leave feelings out of the process entirely. Don't determine what stays by how long you've worked on it, only by how good it really is. Now the seventh mistake is practicing without a goal. Nobody plans a trip without a destination, right? So don't do that with your art either. The trip being your journey to learn art. Set goals like learning a little bit of anatomy and practicing some gesture drawing to eventually be able to draw like an artist that you admire. Or even before that, to just be able to draw your original character in a cool pose. Studies without a goal are so easily forgotten. Just think back of your elementary school days. What do you remember except the stuff that you've been using all the time, like how to write, how to do basic math? Most of the other stuff, gone. So you need a much bigger, more tangible context to whatever you're doing. Instead of randomly doing color studies or practicing perspective, come up with a project that requires a certain set of skills and work on those skills. Because now you'll have a finish line, something to work towards. The goal could be as simple as just making a portfolio of 10 pieces or 15 of your best pieces. Whatever it is, always have a goal. The next one, and we're almost done, is to practice stuff that you don't enjoy. This goes for studies too. You gotta always find an angle that's fun for you. I'm sure you've heard that you should practice this or that, even if you don't enjoy it, because it's important. It's foundation. It's the basics. But none of that matters if you're heading for a burnout. It's pretty simple. Over time, we just do more of what we like and less of what we don't like. We're pretty basic creatures. So let's say you suck at anatomy and as a result your characters look like a bunch of deformed sausages. You probably don't like that either. So the trick would be to find just enough anatomy study to slightly improve your character art, but not past the point where it becomes a chore, a bother, and something that's not fun anymore. Don't jump into a 6-month anatomy study marathon, unless that's fun for you, obviously. Instead, I would look into it just a little bit. Find that nugget of information that's gonna improve your art by just 5%. Enough that it's noticeable to you, and when your character suddenly starts to look better, the anatomy study will slowly become a little more palatable. And over time, those 5% do add up. So it's important to focus on what's fun. This seems maybe obvious, but it's one of those things I find repeating myself to students all the time. So it must not be that obvious. Now finally, the last piece of advice to avoid is no practice is bad practice. I understand the logic, but it does not work with art. You can 100% practice things that won't benefit you in any way. The best example that comes to mind maybe would be to practice drawing from imagination without ever using references. That's a great way to go nowhere. Drawing from imagination isn't even real. Unless you were blind from birth, you're only ever drawing from memory, based on things that you've seen before. And the difference between somebody just casually going through life, looking around but not really paying attention to their surroundings, versus someone actively observing their surroundings and studying real life or photo references, the difference is going to be massive. The first one will take baby steps at best, while the second will make leaps and bounds. Bad practice is learning without a teacher, learning without structure, without a goal. Everything we've seen in the class up to now, basically. All things that, if done right, will have a massive impact on your progress, your success. Bad practice is literally bad practice. It doesn't help. Good practice is good practice, in wiser words. And that's gonna wrap it up for this week's class. Now, if you want good practice, why don't you try my Learn to Draw in 30-day challenge that I posted recently, where I give you daily exercises for a whole month, carefully structured to level up your skills as much as humanly possible in that short amount of time. The link will be up here in a second, and I'll hopefully see you there.